Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in. I recently had a little poll on LinkedIn where I asked everyone if they wanted to see multiple videos about CRM development, where we would discuss how to create a public app, create custom workflow actions, create CRM cards, or if people wanted to see multiple videos about CMS development and where we would work with memberships and serverless functions. And it was a really close call. However, CRM development won. So we'll start off this first video by going over how you can create a public app at HubSpot. If you have a HubSpot developer account, and if you do not have one, you can simply Google how you can create a developer account and you'll get a really nice guide on how you can create a HubSpot developer account. But if you have a HubSpot developer account, you can also create a HubSpot app. And once you create an app, you'll get a screen where you can start filling out information about your app. You can give it a name, you can add a logo, you can give it a description, and you have a tab to configure the auth settings. Now, your app info is quite important if you are planning to publish your application to the HubSpot marketplace. In this demo, we will not publish any applications to the marketplace. But we will go over all the other steps that you need to take to create your public application. Now, in the auth tab, you'll have multiple settings available that you need to configure before you can start creating your public application. You get some default information generated by HubSpot. You'll get your app ID, you'll get a client ID and a client secret, and you'll have to configure an install URL. And you'll have to add a redirect URL. You also need to configure the scopes of your public app, and with the scopes you can determine what access you are going to need to the HubSpot APIs. So if you have the scope selected for the context endpoints with read and write access, your public app will have access to those endpoints. However, they won't be able to access the company endpoints. You have to make sure that you only select the scope that you really need for your public application, because otherwise you might be creating a massive security issue. Now, let's talk about the OAuth flow of HubSpot. Whenever someone is using the install URL, they will get a screen where they can authorize your public app to get access to their HubSpot portal based on the scopes that you have selected. Now, when someone is giving permission for your public application to be installed in a specific portal, HubSpot will then redirect the user to the redirect URL that we have configured in this screen. And the redirect URL will also contain an authorization code. And this authorization code is really important, because this authorization code can be used to retrieve your access and refresh tokens for that specific portal. And you'll need the access tokens to authorize with the HubSpot API whenever you are making an API call from your public application. So to summarize, when someone is using the install URL, they will be redirected to the redirect URL, and the redirect URL will contain an authorization code. You can then use that authorization code to get a refresh token and an access token, and you can use the access token to get access to the HubSpot API, to authorize with the HubSpot API. So let's start by making sure that we have a redirect URL available. What you see right here is the boilerplate that we use whenever we want to create a public application for HubSpot. Now, this boilerplate doesn't contain all the security measures that you need to take when you are creating a public app, but it is really nice for this specific demonstration. What I did is I used NodeJS and Express to create two endpoints. I have an install endpoint available and a OAuth callback endpoint. And the OAuth callback endpoint is going to be used as our redirect URL. So I pushed my code to Heroku a second ago, and I do have a base domain available right now, which is my appname.herokuapp.com, and I can store this as my redirect URL in HubSpot. And I'm going to use the endpoint that I have configured right here, so OAuth callback, and store that right here. Now, so right now I have set up my public app. I have a redirect URL available. I have an install URL available, and I have selected the scope that I need. I'm going to copy my install URL because I want to use that in my code, and I'm going to store it right here. And you'll see that it contains my client ID, and it contains my client ID. It contains a redirect URL, and it is going to redirect to my redirect URL that I have stored right here. And it contains the scope that my public app is going to use. So we have the context scope for read, and we have the context scope for write. Now, if someone is going to visit this URL or is going to visit the install URL, they will be redirected to the auth URL, and the auth URL will then redirect the user to the OAuth callback endpoint whenever they authorize our public app to be installed in their HubSpot portal. And like I said before, redirect URL will contain an authorization code as a URL parameter that we need to use to retrieve our refresh token and access token. So let's take a quick look at how you can use these tokens to make an API call in HubSpot. I created an endpoint called /contact, and for the sake of this demo, I'm assuming that in the GET request we will also pass a portal ID as a URL parameter. I'm then using the portal ID to retrieve my tokens that I stored in the database. So I'm making a query to my PostgreSQL database and retrieving the tokens where my portal ID is matching the portal ID that is passed in the GET request. I then have a little function available to check if the access token is expired or not. And that is based on a little check with the expires in value that we get whenever we are retrieving an access token. So we have a little function available right here where we're using that expires in value to make sure that our access token isn't expired. If it is expired, we are going to refresh our access token, and we're going to pass our portal ID, our client ID, client secret, redirect URL, and all the information that we used in the initial OAuth callback to exchange our authorization code for a refresh token and an access token. But in this case, we are also passing it the refresh token that is stored in our database. And we are making an API call to the OAuth endpoint, and we are passing it refresh token to get a new access token. So right now we have a small functionality where we are retrieving our tokens from the database, checking if the access token is expired or not, and if it is expired, we are using the refresh token in our exchange proof by making an API call to the OAuth endpoint and thus retrieving a new access token. We can then use that access token in an API call, and I have a really simple functionality in this case where we are making an API call to our contacts endpoint, and we are retrieving the first contact from all the contacts that are stored in our HubSpot portal by passing it this specific access token and then displaying the result by making a response by using Express. So discussing all this code is really fun and all, but I know that you want to see this in action. So let's take a quick look what happens when I navigate to my install endpoint. So if I click in on this link, I will be redirected to my /install endpoint, and the /install endpoint is going to redirect me to my install URL that I have available right here. And if I visit that page, as you can see right here, I get the option to select a HubSpot portal that I want to install my integration in. And if I click on this specific portal, I get a pop-up where I can authorize this public app to be installed in my HubSpot portal. And as you can see, it is showing the scopes that are needed for this specific public app. And if you remember correctly, I selected the contact scope read and write. So in this case, it is showing me that this public app will need the read and write scope for contacts. Now, if I click on Connect App, I will be redirected to the OAuth callback endpoint, and it will contain a authorization code, and that authorization code will be stored in my PostgreSQL database, and together with the refresh token and access token. And I now suddenly have the option to make an API call with this specific integration. So I have that contact endpoint available. I'm passing it the portal ID of the portal where I just installed my public app. And if it is working correctly, we should see the first contact that is available in this specific portal. Now, this specific portal is a clean dummy portal, so it is showing me the sample contact, but it is making an API call to the HubSpot API, passing it the access token from the PostgreSQL database, and this is the basics of how you can set up a public app. So this was the first step in multiple videos that I will create around CRM development, and this is the basis that we need for the next few videos, where we will create a CRM card and a custom workflow action. If you want to learn more about CRM development, CMS development, or any of the other cool stuff around HubSpot, make sure to follow me or Bright Digital. Have a great day.